Howdy there, folks. It's Glenn with the almost world-famous Cactus Atlas, and join me today as we explore a contemporary of Tombstone, Arizona, Fairbank, Arizona, and some of its outlying ruins. You know, I've been deliberating on what to do on this episode. There's so much rich history in this area, and I wanted to combine it all into one episode until I realized I made a mistake in my plan. So in my plan, somehow I mistaked this road, which I think is an old railroad grade, for the railroad that passed through here, which would make sense because all the buildings are built like kind of at the same distance away from this. I didn't realize that you can't drive this. No motorized traffic because we're inside of a little riparian habitat. So rather than hang out and slim on this episode, I think we're doing this one on foot because we are going to go seek out some of that history back there. And I'm not really even sure what to expect. So I was reading some of the signs around here, and obviously we've got this townsite to explore, but then there's the old cemetery for this town, old pioneer cemetery out there somewhere, and then the remains of a really large mill that processed the silver ore for the city of Tombstone back in the day. Here I am on the streets of, or the railroad tracks, the former railroad tracks of Fairbank, Arizona. So let's unpack this one a little bit, shall we? What a quaint little area. There's picnic tables and some folks enjoying themselves back there. And it looks like it's open from sunrise to sunset. They have accessible parking. They have some paved trails. This is a globally important bird area because it's a riparian habitat. And some of the buildings are closed to public entry, which means that there might be some that are open. I know there's one, the schoolhouse, that is open during certain hours. I take it this is the museum and visitor information and gift shop, which is crazy. I had no idea they even had any of that here. I just thought it was going to be more like this without the established roads and stuff. Just a few things that we can poke our heads into, but I mean, these are awesome buildings though, just the look already. All right, let me give you some very brief summarized history of this. I think there's some interpretive signs maybe too that we can read, but essentially just think of Fairbank here, Arizona, as a contemporary of Tombstone, and who doesn't know about Tombstone? And after seeing the movies and all of that stuff, I want to say this was established sometime around 1881. The shootout at the OK Corral, I want to say, was in 1881, so right around that time. And this was a stop on a railroad that ran to Tombstone, and that's why this place was so important back in the day. They would actually load the silver ore onto the train here at this location that they were mining out of Tombstone. And this was a waypoint to one of the biggest cities at the time in the West, Tombstone, Arizona. Of course, we have history that predates the European pioneer history out here. I guess those that came from the eastern side of the United States, or maybe even the West, from California, you could say, not the Spanish or the natives. Basically, though, this was supposed to be a native village called Santa Cruz prior to it being taken over by pioneers coming from out east. Now, the unfortunate thing is I do not know the function or purpose of all of these buildings, but we can probably surmise. I will surmise that looks very residential to me with its windows, glass windows, and maybe some kind of a blacksmith shop, something of that nature. And over here we have whatever this one is. We'll take a peek inside though and see if we could see anything. It's hard for me to see because the sun's so bright out here that my eyes are gonna have to adjust and see, so hopefully the camera's doing an okay job. I don't really see anything of that great interest in there other than more wood. But I mean, it's neat. You can stick your nose in there and get that nice musty wood smell, the aged wood that I love and always comment on. One of my favorite smells. Now this is a really cool sign. This is an old Miller High Life sign. It says the champagne of bottle beer. I wonder how old that is. I don't think it's going to, I would doubt that it's like, you know, Wyatt Earp old, but you know, that's still from an older time. Hopefully that's coming out okay. I don't get to see many cool signs on my journeys like this, so it's kind of a treat when we do. I wonder if this was for animals. This is what I'm thinking, maybe some kind of a pen. I don't know if it doesn't look like a chicken house or anything like that, but I'm not sure. It's kind of curious too, why the door is fashioned like that. There was electricity added at some point. You can see the light bulb up there. And other than that, just a cool old wooden building. What do you say? I don't know if this is an outhouse maybe over here, but that's exactly what that is. That is an outhouse right here. And I would say very intact. You know, as common as these things were, you don't see them that much in this state. Even like the toilet seat looks like, you know, I'm guessing that looks OG to me. That looks real. So I guess back in the olden times, if you wanted to see one of these, what it was like fully intact, there you go. Interestingly, you can see that concrete block that it's standing on. I've seen outhouses that don't have the seats on them anymore like that, and just have those concrete, I'm assuming that's where everything went down into a hole in the ground, but never seen it with a seat. I'm guessing these were, I don't know, these are probably renovated, but probably true to form. Don't get splinters on that. There's one on this side also. Very interesting, huh? Yeah, I was just thinking of modern times and how people just seem so dissatisfied in our country today. You know, I know there's all varying levels of how wealth is distributed and all of that, but sometimes I think it's important to stop and think about, you know, if we're sitting here complaining today with our 4K televisions, even our HD TVs, all of this kind of stuff, flushing toilets, running water, and your grandparents' parents didn't have any of that. They didn't have anything to entertain them. I mean, even getting books was probably hard to come by back then. So I think it's important for us to stop and think of the whole history of that, to more appreciate what we have today, because we live better today as individuals, most of us do, than royalty lived, you know, a couple hundred years ago. Nobody had all of this fancy tech and all this kind of cool stuff. So now maybe a castle or something, okay, that's a little bit different, but that gives me appreciation for what I have whenever I'm feeling like, man, I want that or I want this. It's like, nah, I think we're doing pretty good. Here is the next building we're gonna look at. I see this one also had electricity wired into it at some point, and there's barbed wire hanging on the outside, and I am gonna guess I'm getting better at this game, but I'm gonna say a blacksmith shop. What do you guys think? I mean, now it's just storage for various stuff, and I'm having the same issue being able to see in with my own eyes, so I'm hoping my camera's doing an okay job picking up enough in there. So, you know, looking in the interior is not that interesting because, you know, it's kind of storage, but you can smell. And these are various artifacts that people have found on the property and collected and set here. And now I can actually compare and do some visuals for those nails I found out near Alto. This here is like it's almost the same. See the head on that nail? It just looks like it's made by hand as opposed to, see if I can find a more modern looking one. I don't know. This one's pretty skimpy too. I really just don't know. Like, doesn't that, it just feels different. That's exactly the thing that I had found out there. And then here's a bigger version of that with kind of a square head. So I'm guessing, I mean, is this 1800s here? Is this Spanish? Now I'm more thinking what I found wasn't Spanish in nature, but something else, which is what I was thinking was more likely. But interesting, because I see the exact same thing here. Exactly. Feels the same, weighs the same, everything about it's the same. And then you look at these, and these look more like modern and machined and uniform, and that's really the difference to me when you compare these two things. One looks like perfectly machined and the other one is just kind of hammered out, right? Anyway, nails. I always find it a little humorous too that how these little utilitarian tools and things that were just the most mundane, worthless things on their own to the people that use them, we now call them artifacts today. I get why though, but it's just kind of a funny thought. One man's trash is another man's treasure, they say. All right, now things are gonna start getting a little more interesting, and I don't know if we can go into this one or any of them, but let's walk around and see. Let's take a look, and I suppose if we were here and the museum was open, we would learn a lot more, so I would recommend trying to come. I'll tell you the hours in a minute when we get there, but another old structure. So this is temporarily closed to entry. I wonder if it was open before, and warning sign for rattlesnakes, which I know we have those out here, but this very much looks like some kind of residential home to me as opposed to something more around industry or production. Here's the building that would be open certain days of the week. It's the Fairbank Schoolhouse, so I think they have a gift shop and a little visitor center slash museum in there. And let's see. The information is right there. It's currently closed Friday through Sunday, so it's a weekend thing. It's too bad, but it's all right. It's a very beautiful building, though, you have to say, right? Look at that. This is a good spot to kind of survey the town. Some more stuff there that you could see from the main road. I'm wondering if one of those is a train station. That's what I'm gonna guess that is. And then you got the schoolhouse and then the other buildings. What I thought, just by looking at pictures, all I thought was here was this little section. I didn't realize it went over there. I didn't do a lot of deep study on it, but it's more sizable than I thought. Still bite-sized, but definitely more robust than I gave it credit for. And there's a little interpretive sign just talking about the 19th century and how this area just got flooded with culture. And I would even say before that, you know, from the natives' perspectives with the Spanish coming through here, probably as far back as the 1700s, I would imagine, maybe even the 1600s. I had no idea. This is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Back when the Old West was young, is what this says. So in 1882, this was known as Junction City. Here we go. This is talking about the railroad and the Fairbank Townsite. And I think these were the mills that shipped their ore from this location here. And basically didn't last that long like a lot of the other places around here. So you can see the railroad went to Tombstone, which is not far from here. You know, I would not be surprised. Actually, I would be surprised if someone told me that the Earps, the likes of the Earps, traveling via rail at times, never passed through this town. Unless this was not really meant for people trains or something like that, but I think that sign was basically saying if you were coming out here to mining towns, chances are you passed through this very place. So think of all of the characters that you've heard about in Old West films like Tombstone and pick out the historic ones, and many of them, if not all of them, pass through here. This would be a fantastic building to get to go inside and tour, but I don't think we're gonna be able to. This is a neat facade. You can see the underlying brick and start to really just, you see its age. I don't know how modern that white plaster is on the outside. It looks pretty fresh, but then you see it crumbling apart. So the looks are probably deceiving, I'm gonna guess, when it comes to that. And that old mix of brick and plaster that I love. It's just such a photogenic thing to me. I wonder if that was a jail or they just barred it up to keep people out. It's kind of freaky. You can see there's like something in there. I guess part of the window's blowing in the wind. Or maybe there's ghosts up in there. This is such a fantastic little ghost town. This is a must do. I don't know how I've not taken time to come see this until now. It's a shame. I think we'll do this. There's a cemetery and then the Grand Central Mill ruins. This should not be a long hike. I think about a little less than a half mile to the graveyard, or the cemetery rather. And then a little bit further to get to the mill ruins. I don't think I'm gonna even be going like 5 miles total. I'm gonna just come back the way I came for time's sake, as this seems to be the most direct way to do it. But a beautiful trail. You see what I'm saying? They just really developed, the BLM, I assume is who did this, just did a bang up job with the site. Good job. Here's the first sighting of something old along the trail. I have no idea what that is. Almost looks like some kind of a thing to dump ore or something into. All right, here's a sign to update our position. I've been walking for a little while. The Grand Central Mill ruins are 1.25 miles away, and the Fairbank Cemetery is 50. 50 miles, 50 feet, 50 yards, I don't know. Or is it a half mile? 50. The loop trails back there said that if you started in the other place, it would come back on the railroad grade for the railroad that passed through Fairbank, and if we surmised it went right in front of the post office, this is that. So I didn't confirm this for sure to know, but this is very well where the railroad tracks were laid and why it's so straight and such a clear path today. We made it to the Fairbank Cemetery site. It was a little bit of a walk. You know, that's a little over a half mile, I would say. But not bad. I feel good. Let's go see the cemetery. They definitely buried their people far away from the town site. Oh, I gotta catch my breath. You can see some of the mountains have snow on them around here. And we came from down there, out towards where you see the really green trees. That's the road, and Fairbank is right up on that route, so you get a sense of how far we've come. I really like what they did here too. This is a fantastic little spot. These people get a view for the afterlife. Put down some of my backpacks and stuff and let's unpack this. This is an old looking graveyard. I always mix those up. Cemetery. So the Fairbank Historic Cemetery, I'm gonna guess we're not gonna see much more than some rotted wood and piles of rocks. I'll be very surprised if we see more than that, but I'll be pleased if we do. Now, reading about Fairbank, in its prime, during when Tombstone was operating and the mines in Tombstone were still operating and hadn't flooded yet, Fairbank had a population of about 100 people, I want to say, but this kind of makes me think that could be true, because this is a pretty tiny little cemetery as far as these things go, but just kind of proof that when people settle down, you're gonna have death, and you need a place to bury your dead. But you know, this is very similar to what you would see in Boot Hill in Tombstone, which we visited before. Same style, and if that's the original wooden cross, you know, I've seen a few things like that are still around, and it's really amazing to me when you find them, and maybe that's one of them, or maybe it was put up in a later time. I didn't even plan on coming to this cemetery, to be honest with you. Another wooden cross and pile of rocks. They've all fallen over here, but you could see there's quite a bit of dead buried here. If the rocks are an indicator of where they lie, some of the piles seem scattered about, so maybe it's hard to place the exact location of where some of these people are, but nothing fancy. And to me, when I see things like this, it lends credence to this is probably an 1800s cemetery, true pioneer cemetery. People that knew about the shootout at the OK Corral and talked about it in their time are probably buried here. People that maybe even saw the face of Doc Holliday or Wyatt Earp. Just imagine that. Them passing through on the train through Fairbank, or who knows. People place rocks and things up here, and you know, someone tried to put this together like a puzzle, it looks like. It's very interesting though. I would have loved to have seen this cemetery in its prime. It's just in such poor repair now. You can see more concrete over there and there through that thorny stuff. And I lived a good chunk of my life on the East Coast, where you have a lot of history there that's older than the stuff we study on this channel. Even in the Midwest, and you know, the cemeteries there just are more elaborate. The monuments today, a lot of them have faded, but they're still readable. You have a lot of like stone monuments, things like that. But out west, people that are much younger than those that I, you know, would seek out on the East Coast, I guess it was just they didn't have as much out here. It wasn't as established, so you didn't get a nice funeral. You got a pile of rocks and some wood, but it's still fascinating to go seek it out, just because, just thinking of the people's memories, basically. There's really nobody left to tell some of these people's tales, so I like to come visit them sometimes and hang out, I guess. All right, I see the trail we need to take, and it's going to continue that way. We probably have close to a mile to go out to the ruins of some old mill. You see where the river is, the San Pedro River. It's really easy to see the sea of green that goes up the bank. So you could see people basically just built up and down the river because they needed water, not only to live, but to operate and do the things they did out here. Well, the Fairbank Cemetery right up there, up that hill. Beautiful spot, so I understand why they chose it. And I just wish there were more names to remember, because we only saw one or two. I notice at times on the trail here, it abruptly drops off at a slant along the edge, which lends credence to this being an old railroad grade. like the sign back there that I read indicated. I wasn't sure if it was this part or something else, but I'm gonna guess it was this part. We arrived at the Grand Central Mill and just wow. All that's left are the stone walls of what was once a big mill that processed the silver ore mined from over 50 mines in the Tombstone, Arizona area. So this is where they brought all that ore, dumped it here for processing. If you don't believe me, this is what it would have looked like when it had its full glory going on. And now, that's all that's left. The sign asks you to ponder the sound of thunderous hammers, the stamps here going up and down 100 times an hour, I think is what it said. And just to imagine you'd hear the noise of that, just the stamps, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. Wow. This is impressive, actually. I wasn't expecting this. Good thing I brought my drone for this one, because this is a very vertical specimen to study. And it's really interesting, just look up at the hill and see how the wall continues on into the hill, but some of it's crumbling away. Some of it seems to be very sturdy and intact. Just think, one man's discovery, Mr. Schifflin, led to this. Most likely, I would have to think it is. This was all because of the Tombstone silver. There's an old chute or something that's riveted together. And we'll get a close-up look at the wall. There's a hole in the wall. I don't think it's a tunnel, but it'll at least give us a nice cross-section to see how thick this thing is. Well, you can clearly see it's a lot of rocks stacked up. And then there's this. That looks like almost like mud. But it doesn't look natural. It looks like, I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe that's just the hill, but it almost looks like some kind of adobe stuff, maybe stuffed in the middle of the big rock foundations. Definitely best enjoyed from the air, wouldn't you agree? But wow, just knowing the history here, the noise, everything. So cool. That ended up being one heck of an adventure, and I got my steps in today, which I needed badly. How cool was all that? That was really cool to explore back there. And this town, I tell you what, vastly underestimated how cool Fairbank is. Anyway, this is where we part ways for the week. You know we'll be back next week with a new episode, so thanks for watching this one. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and see you down the road. Bye-bye.